some issues,
Good
but
morning.
I got it sorted.
Awesome. Good morning,
Hi,
Erica.
apologies for my late arrival. I was having a couple of issues, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
It's I am so small media that if we start a minute or two late like we did today, it's okay. People are usually kind enough to wait on me. I'm not quite big enough that I get a bunch of angry emails yet saying, "Hey, what happened?" So that's always nice. There's some benefits to being small media.
Oh yeah, I could tell. Yeah.
Then on the downside, of course, not nearly enough people see my criticisms of Morning Joe. So if the small media
Oh,
were a
how
little
I
bigger, it
hate
would be
that
better.
show.
When I had a Twitter account that wasn't getting hacked every 10 minutes, I would not live tweet because I would watch it a little on a tape delay, but I used to live tweet Morning Joe before work just because it was so so it's worth watching for one reason and one reason alone. This is how the people inside the club actually think. And the lack of space between the Biden Democrat in Mika and the W. Bush Republican in Joe Scarborough. That's just like that's how people really are. They're all sitting around a table together, just talking friendly. And then when they go on a show that's not behind the scenes in the way Morning Joe is, then they pretend to hate each other. And then they come back on shows like Morning Joe and they're all friends again.
Pretty much. It's funny. I just wrote something about like Canada's elite.
Yes.
And like when I was like researching for that, it made a lot of things made so much more sense. And um especially particularly some of their responses, I'm like, oh, a lot of the patterns that we're seeing are being repeated across Western countries. And I'm looking at, first of all, let's take basically I said the elites were messing up and they screwed us over. Okay, that's basically the point of that. But also, Canada has not had um, a left-wing populist political presence in like 30 years, or maybe even
I mean,
longer than that.
you could make the argument that the National Democratic Party has been like this sort of weak adjunct to the liberals since Tommy Douglas died, if you really want to. Even before then, arguably.
Yeah. And finally, so I'm going to I need to make a video. I need to do all this stuff. Anyway, so finally we get like a bit of left-wing populism and everybody lost their minds. Everybody said everybody who was of means, let's say, lost their minds. The entire political establishment. Now, I wasn't really that tuned in until I saw everybody else lose their minds. And then I'm like, what's happening here?
Well, it's like you have to
and then I was like, huh. So then I began to look at it a little closer and I'm like, oh, there are some interesting political movements happening. If you look at like Green UK is doing really well.
Yes.
Didn't they just take a by-election in Kent?
They took a by-election. The most anti-Zionist candidate for party leadership won. Now, I want to insert my usual slightly pessimistic old Gen X radical take here when I say that he's not really as anti-Zionist as the people who really support him are projecting onto him.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, he's less anti-Zionist than Corbyn even. But,
Mm-hmm.
and this is an important but, unlike Corbyn, he's done a good job of getting all the Greens left of a certain position together on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Corbyn's attempt to form a new party ended up with missteps like inviting a couple of people who are really, really conservative, except for Palestine, to join his new party because they're good on Palestine, which has screwed them up entirely on their entire domestic agenda and has really been a handicap to their organizing, I think. And people's disappointment in Corbyn's attempt to form a party is being channeled into the UK Greens, I believe.
I see. I see. I see. I see. But that means that there is a disaffected left,
Yes, yes, it does. Very
right?
disaffected.
And I am sure there's a disaffected left in this country. And so when everybody else is giving their political hot takes, all the pundits and stuff, I thought to myself, well, we really don't know what's going to work in Canada at this point, do we? If you haven't had representation in like a generation, then you
Yeah.
really don't know.
I mean,
Second of all, you have, if you actually have an anti neoliberal viewpoint, we don't know how much that's going to bring out people. I was reading um what was I reading? I was reading a survey, like a research survey. Um and it said that there's about 27% of the Canadian left electorate is a disaffected left.
I would
I
believe that.
mean, more than quarter of the country is a lot.
So I'm going to just take one moment actually to break and do an intro since I got
Okay.
thrown off there.
Yeah, we're just chatting now.
For those of you who are catching up, welcome to the Eclectic Radical. As always, I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical, and with me this Sunday is Erica Ifill of the Hill Times and the Bad and Bitchy Podcast, joining us from our wonderful neighbor to the north, Canada, so that we can talk about how I've always suspected that Canada and the US are more than alike than different, and I don't mean this in a good way, folks. I mean that you shouldn't be fooled by things like national health care and Mark Carney saying he doesn't like Trump. I mean that their ruling class and our ruling class are all in bed together having a big party at our expense. And like George Carlin said, we're just not part of the club.
Oh no. Oh no. We might not even be the help.
You know, it's getting to the point where they might not think they need any help anymore. That's why they're so enchanted and excited about so many aspects of AI.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Despite the fact that a large language model isn't even really an AI, but that's a topic for a whole different show.
No, Canada's not that different. We have a lot of the same issues because we were colonized similarly.
Yes. In
And
fact,
we have
some
the
of the
same
people,
Mother Britain roots, and we have the same.
a whole bunch of people who didn't want to live under the U.S. government went
Basically.
from the U.S. to what was then Nova Scotia, and settled so much of it that they broke it off and called it New Brunswick.
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is, there's a lot of historical revisionism
Yes.
when it comes to Canada. I just heard Carney at the Liberal Party convention just engage in this historical revisionism about, and this is what he said. He said, Canada was not, we Canada was formed by a partnership. And I was like,
well, yes. I mean, technically speaking, I
Like,
mean,
who are the partners? Okay.
have you? Okay, so you want to Google the family compact?
All right.
So Upper Canada. This is way back in the day. Let me find this. I'm amazed. I'm always glad to talk about this. I got to talk about this a little on my most recent show. Here it is. This is Wikipedia, so anybody can find this under.
Oh, you're talking about the Laurentian elite,
Yes.
basically.
A small closed group of men who exercise most of the political, economic, and judicial power in Upper Canada, mostly analogous to today's Ontario, from the 1810s to the 1840s. William Mackenzie was arrested for protesting against them when he came to the U.S. to try to raise recruits for a revolution in Canada. The U.S. arrested him and sent him back to Canada.
Was that before or after
William
Sir
Lyons
John A.
Mackenzie. Sorry, I'm
Macdonald?
mixing up my. It's also complicated. This was so in the 1840s, William Lyons Mackenzie does the revolution thing and fails.
Right.
And then after that, there's the whole reaction against the revolution. But in the course of their reaction against the revolution, they have to pretend to clean up a lot of the corruption and vaguely make Canada have some pretense of responsible government.
Oh, pretend and vague are very Canadian.
Yes.
In terms of ideals.
And then you have
I see a lot of Americans online asking about Canada.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of
the thing to remember,
we've been through this.
All you need to know about Canada is good Americans like Captain James T. Kirk and John Wick are Canadian.
Yeah, Canada has its. Here's the thing. I think Carney is a more polished version of what Pierre Poilievre wishes he could be.
Well, since you brought up Carney, let's mention that to USians who don't understand this, Mark Carney is like if Jerome Powell were suddenly elected president. The guy who ran their central bank became leader of the Liberal Party and is now prime minister. Would you ever elect Janet Yellen or Jerome Powell president here in the U.S., folks?
Well, yeah. See, this is what I put together. I'm like, oh, the elites are eliting. He's their boy. He is literally their boy.
Yes.
And he will promote what they want. And that's it. A banker is going to bank. The man is a banker through and through.
Yes.
Like investment banker, Goldman Sachs kind of banker. We're not talking about the branch manager down the street. No, this is the guy who oversaw Brexit first of all, which I know the Brits aren't happy about that, about his time there during that time. He was governor of the Bank of Canada during Stephen Harper years, big time conservative. I mean, the man is a conservative. What Mark Carney is doing and not doing is of no surprise to me whatsoever. Because last year, I wrote about how the man is a banker, so don't expect much in terms of him doing something for Canadians. He's building Canada Inc. That is the point. And Canada Inc. has no room for effective social programs. Are you serious? No matter what Carney says, he will throw out the national identity stuff. So he'll throw out law and order, which is a whole nother section.
Here in the U.S., law and order is a catchphrase for the police need to shoot more black people.
Well, for us, it's indigenous and
of course, yeah, bash them on the head while they try to protect their land from oil predators.
and here's the thing, Mark Carney has already signed a bill that does give more sweeping police powers to our data. So it's called the Strong Borders Act, I believe.
Of
It's called
course
Bill
it is.
C2.
Of course it is.
And he passed it last year. And I thought to myself, there it is. At the end of the day, the scrutiny on police access to data through ISPs is a lot more lax with Mark Carney. Immigration, immigration administration, so the immigration process has come more in line with the US
Oh, that's not good.
in the sense that was this the same bill? Anyway, there were a bunch of bills that took away a whole bunch of rights and nary a peep from most people, right?
Yeah.
Because, everybody has Carney fever. I personally don't buy it. Um, I think that he's a conservative, period. And to him, we are just line items in a spreadsheet. We're not even line items.
It's
We're just items on a spreadsheet.
it's really important for us to all remember that the worst ideas embraced by conservatives around the world were once proudly trumpeted as liberal by parties that still call themselves liberal to this day in places like Canada and the UK and Australia.
Or you do like Barack Obama and you just take conservative policies.
And you praise Ronald Reagan. And it was the most
Every time
hilarious
he
thing.
does that, I just cringe.
I saw the most hilarious thing the other day. It was somebody talking about how the Republicans were once so righteous they wouldn't even accept a candidate for president who was divorced. It's like, how long ago was that? Ronald Reagan was our only divorced president, right? Until Donald Trump, who's our second divorced president.
Yeah, and those two aren't ringing endorsements. I blame Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney and Margaret Thatcher for a lot of the problems we have now.
I
The
blame
rising income inequality. People need to understand that.
I blame General Electric because they bought those people off.
Pardon?
I blame General Electric for buying those people off in the first place. I love to blame politicians because it's good for clicks, but at the same time, politicians are employees of the landlord class that really runs things, that owns 90% of the stock. I exaggerate, but still owns 90% of the stock, owns 75% of the property, owns 50% of the land.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this entrenched, and they used to call themselves capitalists and say we're not landlords, we're building stuff, but now they're just collecting rent on internet real estate.
The economy has become a lot of rent seeking.
Yes.
Let's say.
Yes.
And I personally there really isn't much of a difference in the way the two countries approach these things. And for all of those Americans who think they're going to escape to Canada, like in The Handmaid's Tale, it ain't going to happen. They are going to send you back. You know why? As much as Carney says, whatever he says, we're not going to do this with America, we're not going to do that with America. When you look at the fine print, look at border security and just national security in general and see how intertwined those are. Immigration and border security are pretty much they're Canadian and American policies are basically superimposed upon each other. They do not differ and they share a lot of information. And I think that's what people don't realize, how actually intertwined they are. And this, I wish I could blame a conservative, but really who I blame a lot too is Justin Trudeau, because that happened a lot during his time. So
You have hit on another similarity, because the biggest reason that Donald Trump became president again in 2025 is because Joe Biden governed so much like Trump from 2021 to 2024 that nobody was really scared of Donald Trump anymore. I will admit it myself. I thought, well, we saw Trump in the first term. We're seeing Biden now. I mean, Biden's so much
my
like
life hasn't
Trump.
gotten better.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't care as much as McCartney could talk about the economy all he wants to. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is, do you feel like you can get ahead? Do
The,
you feel like you're making progress in life? Do you feel like you're better off?
no,
And if you,
nobody
I
thinks.
am convinced that Carney's biggest Achilles heel is domestic. It's
Yes.
affordability.
Yes.
Till this day, the only thing he's done really on affordability is um there is just a new tax credit that used to be the GST tax credit. So he
Mm-hmm.
basically moved one tax credit and named it something else. And he's like, here. And the thing about tax credits, and this is what I wish we had more reporters who knew how numbers worked,
Yeah.
because, you know, sometimes I read and I'm like, okay, so what's the average rebate? How much do you have to spend before you get part of that rebate? And when it comes to tax breaks, tax credits, and stuff like that, that is one time during the year. The rest of the year, you have to outlay that money.
And I
And
don't
so the
know.
timing is off,
And
right?
here in the U.S., of course, we have payroll taxes. So we pay those taxes regardless of those credits, unless for some reason there's something weird in the credit that tells the payroll tax people not to run it, like I think happened once under George W. Bush. But
Mm,
since the payroll taxes happen anyway, you get that tax credit, like you said, when you file your taxes.
yeah.
It's not even that you're getting money back because it's still being taken from you in your payroll taxes.
You're getting the net is
Yes.
lower. That's
Yes.
basically what it comes down. See, numbers, okay? You get
Yeah.
what I'm saying
And
here.
they tax, and then of course they tax the credit. And so when they tax the
Oh,
credit,
that's right. They
you're
do tax
basically
the
paying
credit.
a piece of your credit back to the government as a
Hmm.
kickback. Now, I'm for taxes. I'm not complaining about my taxes. I've never complained about my taxes. But people who pay a whole lot less tax than me, relatively speaking, won't shut up about it. And people think tax credits are somehow the best thing anybody can ever get. And no, I need cash.
And so the other thing too is tax cuts. I wish people would also understand that a tax cut means a cut in services
Even
usually.
more than that, a tax
And those the cost of those services will be borne by the
is
individual.
a tax cut for the wealthy is a tax increase, a de facto tax increase for everybody
For
else.
everybody else. And so right now we're going through basically a laceration of government. It's so bad. I'm like, it's Canada's Doge. So the secret with Canada is Canada does everything the US does. It used to be like 10 years later. Now that process has accelerated, but we basically do the same thing. We basically import the same laws, the same discussion, the same this. There's a reason why I pay attention to British and American news. American news, you know what's coming.
Yeah.
It's like it literally is a crystal
This is
ball.
This is honestly why I pay attention to Israeli and Australian news, because if it happens in Israel or Australia, it's going to happen in the US. The
Well, if it
best
happens in the
example,
UK, it might possibly happen in Canada too.
and it's like,
So, for example, digital, I like, what are they talking about? Age restriction for the internet
yes,
in, is it social media or the internet in Canada? I think it's social media
it's social media. Well, so
in Canada.
there are three different pieces to it. The laws that are being run everywhere
Hmm.
fall into one of three different categories, and there's usually some combination of these in all of them. The first is age checking access to social media,
Right.
allegedly. The second is requiring the social media people to be able to prevent that proof to the government. And the third, which here in the US has a very direct legal definition, which is abolishing Section 230. But every country has its own version of Section 230. That's what makes the internet that we all know and love. If Section 230 goes away in the United States, that means every website is now a publisher as opposed to a landlord,
Hmm.
which means they now have not just the power, they already have the power, but they then have the duty to impose censorship on anything that might end up in a lawsuit against them as a publisher.
Hmm. So we're looking at, yeah, proposed age restrictions.
And all the age restrictions eventually break down to requiring sites to verify people's identity. And requiring sites to verify people's identity means more of those little messages you get when you log into LinkedIn and the error message comes up. A security scan has told you this password was accessed in a data breach.
Well, at what point is physical ID going to be required?
Well, and
Like,
that
I, in terms of, or sorry, at what point are we going to require some sort of digital ID mechanism like they tried to do in
Well,
Britain?
so the age check is really straightforward and simple because the age check makes it sound like you're just entering a birth date on a website, but lots of websites already require you to do that. And clearly, you can say you're whatever age you want to say when you go into that site.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're actually talking about is giving those websites the ability to track every other cookie where you've been made to give someone your age and compare them against each other to verify that you're really who you say you are, which is
Mm.
verifying your identity. And now all of a sudden, all these agencies who are responsible for verifying your identity have access to your information and are just waiting to be hacked. And I will note that my Twitter accounts keep getting hacked because I made a dumb mistake, and my passwords were made vulnerable in a data breach over on Discord. And
Oh,
keep
the
in mind that
Discord
Discord was
breach.
talking about forcing everybody into adopting very strict rules. And then they backed off it because they realized we keep getting hit by data breaches. Are we going to be liable for people's data if we get breached?
Yeah. 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 So at the at the end of the day, um it's, I wouldn't say, I haven't heard it confirmed that they're doing this, but I can't see why they're not looking at it. I'm pretty sure they are.
So if you follow if you follow tech journalists, the best independent tech journalist I can think of who is really visible everywhere is Taylor Lorenz. And
Yeah.
if she is bought off, she's bought off by people who don't really seem to care about the fact that she's telling the truth about enough stuff to matter.
I just I don't buy that she's like, I think that she's
So I've talked to her a lot. We're not as
Hold on.
close as we
Like,
used
let
to
me
be.
just
But
say
she's like a
this.
very nice girl who's really.
Let me say this. A lot of people are saying that so and so's dangerous and so and so's
Yes.
dangerous. She is somebody who challenges power
Yes.
and she does her job and
Yes.
she does it well.
And
That
she's
and she has taken a
and
lot of
and
abuse
and
because of it.
the reason I
I don't
understand all this
see,
stuff is following her. The reason I follow all this stuff I just explained to you
yeah,
is following her.
yeah, yeah. She's good at what she does and she is good at adapting to the internet.
Yes.
She's very good at that. And I think that that is underrated in Canada. In Canada, you still have Canadians really believe in our institutions. I mean, I don't. But
We have the same problem here in America, so I know what you mean.
yeah, I've worked in the institutions. I've seen the how the sausage is made. So I'm I know of what I speak in terms of the way I conceptualize it. And um they still believe that institutions are going to save them. And I'm like I am now realizing how brainwashed by the Laurentian elite we are because our institutions are for them. They're not for us. They're to keep us in line, sure, but they're not for
Oh,
us. They're not for
right.
justice. Canada Canada doesn't have a value that includes justice.
This
It
goes
is
back.
not it is not in our I don't care what anybody says. People could say, "Oh, we're nice people." And that's what Canada uses in place of
Well,
justice. They
so
use, "Oh, we didn't mean to, but we're nice people,
let's
but we're kind, but da 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 da."
let's
And so you have this veneer of um well, everybody's just trying to do their best. And it's like, no, you're not. You're
let's
stealing from us.
this
Like,
cuts back to the
I don't understand. Like, you are stealing from us.
it cuts back to this question of liberal again because
What is liberal?
I want to fall back on this what is liberal sort of
Oh,
thing
good.
because the word liberal, linguistically speaking, in its original meaning at the time people were forming the Liberal Party, liberal meant generous in
Oh,
its
like a
most
noblesse
basic.
oblige?
Generous was noblesse oblige was a very good way of looking at it, but you have to remember that the liberals when they were formed in the UK were the party of the middle class bourgeois, and the
Yes.
noblesse oblige was a
Yes.
conservative thing. But liberal means generous in the sort of
Right.
the
Right.
basic original
In its
meaning. Now,
nomenclature. Yeah, yeah.
but there we have to think about that means that in order to be liberal, you have to be able to afford to be liberal, which means there is a liberal class. And you get into now you're in Aristotle's golden mean, where what you're really talking about is a special set of rules for the aristocracy who are not the same as everyone else. And instead of having landed nobles, now you have rich plutocrats. But if
Right.
the rich plutocrats own 90% of the land, I'm exaggerating the numbers on purpose again, folks. If the
Yeah,
rich,
before somebody, you know how the internet is.
if the
First,
rich,
he's using hyperbole as a method, people. I know I do this all the time. I use hyperbole as a method of argument because it is. It's 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 legitimate. And
yes,
people think that I'm being exact, and I'm like,
no,
"No, it's hype wow.
and
Okay."
we all used to understand hyperbole before conservatives blew it out of the water and made it literal.
Yes. Yes.
But that's just. But anyway, this whole idea of liberal
Mhm.
is an idea that the bourgeois should be the real aristocracy, and that this liberal generosity to the working classes and lower classes is what's going to push the middle class to the top and push the aristocracy down. And so there's another term for liberalism. In Italian, it's la cosa nostra.
Are you serious?
In Latin, it's res publica. Now, I want to really draw attention to the similarity in meaning between the Latin res publica and the Italian la cosa nostra. La cosa nostra means this thing of ours. Res publica means our thing, the people's thing, the public thing, our thing. So there is a direct line between the republic and rule by the mafia.
Yeah, it seems like it's definitely a club. And one of the reasons we even have nations,
yes,
is because of resource protection for that class, which is why I don't believe in borders.
This is why people make the joke.
You want to talk human rights, and the funny thing is, so I'm an economist by trade, right?
Sure.
So, which is funny because people like to tell me about how a supply and demand works all the time, and I'm just like,
don't get me started on Yimbys. That's a whole nother show too.
That's just supply and demand doesn't work like you think it does.
Supply and demand are inputs that the people who make choices use to help them make choices, but they're not actually powerful forces.
Well, they're not. It's aggregation.
Yeah.
A lot of the times.
Yeah.
And I will say that economists fucked up.
Well, it's not even
fucked up, and they fucked up this whole society basically.
Well, the idea,
because if it weren't for them and their stupid ass market policies, okay, we wouldn't have the income and wealth distribution we have today.
Well, and this is true, except ultimately the economists were just justifying the way things were instead of actually learning or explaining anything. And you have to even wonder, did the economists really fuck up? Or were 9/10 of the economists always just writing propaganda for the rich people in the first place?
Well, to be fair, economics is notoriously upper class in terms of origin.
The word malfusion.
White, male. Let me tell you something. You want to talk, economics is one of the most misogynistic disciplines on earth.
I believe
it really
that.
is. I don't even want to get into race because that's a whole nother story. But
remember,
there is a belief in economics that serious economists are male. They're of certain serious economists aren't labor economists. They're not health economists, and that's where women are a lot of the time.
Serious economists
spaces.
Serious economists are white men with transatlantic accents who get invited to advise presidents.
Basically.
Yeah. No.
Basically. Yeah. Me personally, I'm having my own reckoning with macroeconomics, especially. Given
I'm glad you mentioned that, because supply and demand actually works on a microeconomic scale, but when you get to macroeconomics, it doesn't apply anymore.
Because all they do is they just aggregate demand or
supply,
and I'm like, that's not a good way of doing it.
No.
Because the choices and the resources available change with scale, right? And so it's akin to how people think of national finances as household finances, and
Yes.
they're not nary the same. Because I didn't know a household could raise money on the open market through bond issuance. Hello, it doesn't work like that. And so people don't, they think they understand, but they don't.
Well, and they don't. The biggest thing that they don't understand, and I want to be careful because there are limits. There are limits to how this actually works in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing they don't understand is that so-called modern monetary theory is not some radical new interpretation of how money works. It's not really all that new. It's
Right.
just a very simple explanation of how these big governments have always run things,
Mm-hmm.
which is they they finance everything through debt, nothing through taxes, and they use taxation to control inflation. And the biggest reason that inflation is so out of control all over the West is because we're cutting taxes on exactly the people we need to tax more to control inflation.
In what way?
So, so let's try to. I'm going to try to see if I can try to explain this. The way that the currency works, as far as I understand it, and you can correct me because you're the economist. But the way that the currency works, as I understand it, is that seigniorage is essentially a scam by which the national bank enriches the wealthiest investors in private banks every time it issues currency.
I see where, okay, so the way the currency works its way through the economy is
Yes,
different from the way it's
true.
um from the policy itself,
Yes,
so to speak. And that's,
yes.
I think, where mm, I'm still trying to figure out which places of modern monetary theory I'm still thinking with. I'm still.
The main thing, is there. The simplest way to put it is modern monetary theory is just an explanation of what Ronald Reagan was doing, and
Yeah.
saying we should be doing this for healthcare instead of the military. In the simplest way of putting it.
Um. So I here's the thing. I don't want to get it here. Okay. So one of the assumptions of free flowing capitalism is the
Mm-hmm.
free flow of labor.
Yes.
And if you don't have free movement of people, then you really don't have that system you're critiquing.
Which just takes us back to why you don't believe in borders, which is very important.
That is exactly why. So, one, I don't believe in borders because of the way they were erected. It's really now I read this in a book called Black Radicals.
Mm-hmm.
No, Black Marxism.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, Black Marxism. So, in that book, they were basically talking about how the nation state developed and how it developed because it used to be that you had like a little keep or a little or an area of land, let's say.
You had a cottage and a garden on the Lord's land, and the Lord had a castle, and in an emergency you could run and hide in the castle.
You could run and hide in the castle. It got to the point where when the feudal system began to collapse and you had these bourgeoisie as the new, like you said, the new aristocracy, as you said, um,
And this is where the
you
closing of
had
the commons
they
comes in
had
for.
resources to protect,
Yes.
right? So they would hire like sellswords.
Yes.
Sorry for using cell swords. I'm
That's a
also
great
reading.
name. That's
I'm
a
also reading a Song of Ice and Fire.
so
And so I'm using the
I
language.
understand. Yeah, and
Sorry. And so okay. So mercenary groups.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Well,
And
condottieri.
but the mercenary groups, A, you had to pay them a lot, and
Yes,
B, they would just run off and join whichever paid more. They weren't reliable. So the whole idea of the nation was there to have the peons, the little people, have some type of fake ownership in the
yes.
protection of these
It was it.
resources.
The nation state was the. I'm glad you
Hence,
mentioned. I'm glad I said condottieri because the Italian Wars is always a great historical place for this.
oh, okay. The
Cesare Borgia.
Italians have.
Cesare Borgia was the nephew, well, the son of a pope. So that's my favorite fact. Cesare Borgia, the son of a pope. Oh, things were so different back then. But so the pope's son became a duke in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
and this was a period where everybody was at war with everybody, and so
So
he
this
had
is
to
when
be
they had city states.
city states. Yes,
Mm.
one of the things that was one of the specific reasons he was made a duke was because the Pope, of course, in those days had his own little country.
Yes.
And there were people in the Pope's little country who had become too independent and too powerful. And the Pope wanted to put them in their place again. So he got the King of France to make his son a duke. And then he sent Cesare to a section of the Pope's country where the city states were uppity, if you will forgive my using the word. And Cesare smashed the city states for the Pope and established a sort of national government, so to speak. And one of the ways he did that was by bypassing mercenaries and local nobles and recruiting his own standing army directly from the people who lived there.
There you go. There you go. The Italian what you said?
The Italian Wars. There were a whole bunch
Oh.
of these. These are the wars that shaped the modern shape of France and the Habsburg Empire going into
Wait,
the
are we
big buildup
talking
to
about like the
modernity.
city-state wars,
So
Florence and
it
Siena and
started.
Padua and
So it started with something really. It starts way back under Frederick II, who's awesome by himself because he tried to start his own religion to free people from the Pope. Now he's an emperor, and there are all sorts of bad reasons that we can be against emperors. But I can't help but love the idea that he tried to start his own new religion to synthesize Christianity and Islam so that his subjects in Sicily could be happy living together and he wouldn't have to answer to
mean,
the Pope.
not a
There
bad
are
idea.
worse ideas, right? So
They're
yeah,
both Abrahamic languages. Religions.
yeah, and which is what he was trying to come up with the super Islam or the super Christianity that would encompass both and make everybody happy. Because if you really want to look at, and obviously this is not a Jewish reading of the prophecies or a Christian reading of the prophecies or a Muslim reading of the prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
This is simply a materialist reading of the prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
You can see how the alleged Jewish prophecies, the alleged Christian gospels, and the early Islamic writings were all influenced by the same source. And you can see how people in Christianity were responding to prophecies in Judaism, and how people in Islam were responding to prophecies in Judaism. At one point, Muhammad was accepted by Jews as a Jewish prophet and then was rejected when he started talking about bringing the Jews and the Christians and the Arabs all together in this one new religion. So, it wasn't Frederick II wasn't even the first person to try this. But The Pope ended up pissed off at him. And because the Pope ended up pissed off at him, he ended up fighting a long war with the Pope. He ended up dying while the war was still going on. His legitimate son, Conrad, was off in Germany somewhere and was having a hard time pulling the imperial stuff together in Germany, while his illegitimate son, Manfred, was fighting a war in Sicily and southern Italy against the French who had invaded southern Italy. And so ultimately, both his sons died. His grandson was executed by the Pope. The Habsburgs became the emperors because of this.
Oh, the Habsburgs.
And Italy in the south, which had been the Kingdom of Sicily, was divided into Sicily and Naples. Naples being the mainland kingdom and Sicily being the island of Sicily, of course. So Frederick is gone. We have two kingdoms where there used to be one. And then the King of Naples dies without an heir, or without a legitimate heir, I should say, because he has an illegitimate son. And the King of France decides he's the legitimate heir to the Kingdom of Naples and not the illegitimate son. And so he invades Italy. And that's what starts everything. What happens initially is a mobilization of all of Italy against France, sort of a unifying thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the way but Naples is actually liberated, well, not liberated, but returned to the illegitimate son instead of the French by the efforts of the Spanish. So now, while the Pope had brought all of Italy together against the French, now the Spanish are in Naples. And so now you've got this new political problem. Instead of the French, you've got the Spanish. And so for years, you have this, after that, you have this shifting series of wars between the French, the Habsburgs, the Venetians, various city-states, all this stuff going on. And ultimately, it shapes modern Europe. These wars in Italy create the first national armies under the Borgias in Italy, and the French learn from this and create their own national army in France, and France becomes a nation state on steroids and is the most important country in mainland Europe for like hundreds of years after this.
Absolutely.
And this is why I reject great man theory and fall back on historical forces most of the time, because you can see how Louis XIV is being influenced by this bullshit in Italy years before he was ever born.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. See, you're somebody who took humanities.
People say that, but that's here's the fun fact. And I dropped out of college as a freshman and could never get back into it. I graduated at 16 because I'm fortunate that California has a thing where once you're at any age you want, you can take a test to prove that you can graduate high school. And then at 16 you can graduate. Years. You don't have to go through all the BS. But the problem is I didn't realize that college was just the same BS as high school. And so I was thinking, oh, this is going to be great. And it's really just the same thing as high school, but now you're responsible for yourself. And so I was disillusioned by the real world.
It does that.
And I ended up not ever getting a degree. And I've just been, I'm fortunate enough to be part of the white collar work. Autodidact is the old word. I mean,
yes.
In the old days, I could do like Abraham Lincoln and find a lawyer and read for the bar and then say I'm a lawyer, but we can't do that anymore.
You can't just read for the bar. Isn't that what Kim Kardashian did?
No. She still did a whole bunch of actual schoolwork. She just has the wealth to be able to bring it to herself.
Well, it's nice to know that there's something that she can't buy her way through. Totally.
But yeah, no, I also had the good fortune to interact on Twitter back when it was the Twitter we all loved with the late David Graeber, who convinced me that I should not ever be intimidated by anybody's PhD, especially if it was an economics PhD,
Ah!
because a PhD just meant that someone had spent money to learn all the things that I had gone to the effort of learning,
Mm-hmm.
and that meant that because they were buying the PhD, they might not have put the effort in that I did.
Well, I think that well, speaking of, I didn't even get into we didn't even get into university, but that's a whole different
Yes,
story.
that's also its own show, but that's a great example too, because university is an excellent, and humanities, since you mentioned them, is an excellent example again of this notion of elite culture, because we talk about the liberal arts. Well, what are the liberal arts? The liberal arts are the arts a gentleman needs to know to be liberal. So once again, we come down to, well, what does it mean to be liberal? And we fall back on the original meaning. Liberal is a generous rich person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, well, I'm not sure what the Canadian Liberal Party is right now, to be honest. I'm not
There.
sure what it means to be a liberal. Um, and it's to me the Liberal Party is just the elites, the elite shape shifting,
Yes.
basically. That's it. That's their the Laurentian elite in Canada speak through the Liberal Party.
Yes.
That's their party. And um it just seems to me that there is a disconnect between uh people who gas prices are going to inconvenience, but that's about it. And people who are struggling. I don't think that there has been enough said in this country or enough acknowledged in this country about how much people are struggling. And I do think that that is going to be the liberals' Achilles heel
Is it? I mean, that would
because they
make
really
sense.
haven't done much on that file.
That's what
They
killed
really haven't.
Biden.
This,
Biden was
mm,
Biden was killed by affordability over and
yeah,
over again, and then
yeah.
Kamala
And
Harris.
then you see, this is what the liberals are going to do the same thing as the Democrats.
They're
They're
going to
going
deny that
to,
the economy is really bad. They're going to
yeah, they're
point
going
to
to deny
numbers
that
and
the
say this
economy
is
is really
great.
bad. I remember the Liberal Party was touting earlier, I think late last year, about how many jobs that they created, failing to mention they were all part-time jobs.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I went to a job
I keep
fair.
being told another thing. I keep being told that immigrants are responsible for everything and are responsible for the housing crisis, responsible for the entire affordability piece. And now that we have basically ground immigration to a halt, not people, that's hyperbole too, but you get what I'm saying, that it's very low to the point where we have no population growth.
Yeah, because
And
immigration has been the
I'm like,
only
how are
driver
you
of
going to fund all of these programs that
yeah.
you keep telling us about?
Immigration has
Okay.
been what's driving population growth in North America for how many years now?
Exactly. And if you're not immigrating, but if you're against immigration, you still require population growth.
That's why they
What is the alternative?
that's why they want to
Women.
outlaw abortion.
Women. There you go. There you
That's
go.
why that's
And
why
I
I
know that Carney said in his speech over the weekend, yesterday, oh, well, women will continue to have choice. Eh, is there choice without access?
so so this is where
access
so
access to
is
abortion is a huge problem
and,
here.
and is there
Okay, so
choice
this idea
without
that we're not
affordable
banning
access?
abortion, you don't have to ban outright things. You can literally just make it administratively difficult
Hey,
for people to access certain
for
things. And
years,
it's a de facto ban that way.
for
So
about four,
this,
for about
mm,
6 years, because it happened during Trump's first term. So for about 6 years, even though it was still technically legal, there were no abortion clinics in Mississippi because the last abortion clinic in Mississippi closed down in like 2017 or 2018 because of the defunding of Planned Parenthood.
there are ways to do it. And that's the thing about
And
policy, is
let's
that
all know,
policy is so intricate.
if I can
Mhm.
stop you right here, I want to note Democrats cooperated wholeheartedly with the defunding of Planned Parenthood, even as they spoke up against it. All the
Of
usual
course they
suspects.
did.
People
They
blame Joe
also,
Manchin for everything publicly, but there are a whole bunch of Democrats in the Senate whose only job is to block progressive legislation and get Republicans appointed as judges.
let's put it this way. I'm going to get to the freak out of the Democrats and the freak out of the Democrats and the sanitization of Kamala Harris and
Yes.
AOC. I see what's happening here. And I'm just and then I see Canada and I'm like, you're up, right? Because it's amazing to me that the Democrats have more smoke for Hassan Piker than they ever did for Joe Manchin or
I want to,
Kristen Sinema
and
or John Fetterman,
the
because
only
they
people,
were upholding the status quo. They all work for the same masters.
yeah,
Do
it's
you think the
exactly
ruling
true.
class people, like, I want people to think about it. How do you think the ruling class stays the ruling class? They
Exactly.
have a horse in all races.
Yes.
The reason they hate progressives so much is because they're anti-capitalist.
So in 1972, everybody remembers the presidential election. And
Is
because
this
of the
the Ford election?
72 is Nixon versus McGovern, which is an
Oh,
important moment in
McGovern.
American history. People remember the
I've heard about your
presidential
McGovern.
election, but they don't remember the congressional election.
No.
So the presidential election was decided even before it began, when a guy on the at the Democratic convention named Thomas Eagleton, who had just been announced as the running mate
Of McGovern?
as McGovern,
I
told
hear I don't hear about him either.
Thomas Eagleton is actually an important name to remember because it's going to come up again soon. But Thomas Eagleton said to a reporter at the Democratic convention, "I'm not really sure what McGovern is for except abortion, amnesty, and acid." Basically, touting his own the top of his own ticket
Mm-hmm.
as irrevocably stained by the counterculture.
Mm-hmm.
And so McGovern spends most of his campaign trying to run to the right of perceptions of him, and ends up getting a sort of petty revenge, dumping Eagleton from the ticket when it comes out that Eagleton had bipolar disorder and had taken electric shock therapy for his mood swings. And so when this comes out, mental health being a big deal, Eagleton is dropped from the ticket in a shameful way that ends up hurting Biden even more.
Really?
Yes. I'm not Biden. McGovern. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Ends up hurting McGovern even more. And McGovern loses the presidential election in a slaughter.
Spectacularly. Like,
Yes.
he's known for that slaughter.
But Democrats won that election in Congress overwhelmingly by running against the Vietnam War without mercy. They were flogging that horse. But what they didn't have in common with McGovern was the perception of being of the left. Some of them were literally, one of the new congressmen from California, I wish I could remember his name, was a bank president who hung a "Stop the War" sign up on his bank in order to show that he supported the youth. And he used
So
that to go on to
dove
run for
into
Congress.
counterculture at the congressional level.
They won the election on the counterculture at the congressional level by flogging the war horse, but at the same time, they're against the counterculture when it comes to their presidential candidate.
Yeah.
And here's the best part.
So they have all bases covered.
One of the senators elected in 1972 is a freshman senator from Delaware named Joe Biden. You see how I was getting ahead of myself. Now,
I knew Biden. That seemed like Biden's start time around.
The man that he ran against, which matters. Sorry, I'm an idiot and dropped something. The man that he ran against was a man named J. Caleb Boggs, better known as Cale Boggs. Cale Boggs was a Republican, part of a long-running Republican machine that had been in Delaware since Reconstruction. Delaware wasn't a Reconstruction state, but that's how long the Republican machine had been in Delaware. And it was a fairly liberal Republican machine. Cale Boggs was the Senate minority leader who allied with Majority Leader Hubert Humphrey to pass all the civil rights stuff under LBJ.
Mm-hmm.
He was, despite being a Republican, and I use these terms loosely because we're still talking about the U.S. government. Despite being a Republican, he was as pro-black as any white politician in the 1960s and 1970s could possibly be.
You know what?
To draw this more directly, in 76, Jacob Javits died. Jacob Javits was longtime liberal Republican congressman from New York. Mm-hmm. He's replaced by a conservative Democrat named Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Oh, gosh, no.
And the best part, in 1978, Ed Brooke, the first...
Wait, is it the same Moynihan?
Same Moynihan. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, D.P. Moynihan, the guy who wrote the memo on the black family for LBJ. That's the guy.
Same guy.
Same guy.
We're not mixing people up here.
Same guy.
Okay.
Now.
Yeah. There's certain people who were like, there's certain names in U.S. history.
Well, there are a lot of Irish Moynihan.
Kissinger, all of those 60s and 70s dudes that just stick in my head. They're just stuck.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So anyway, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And then in 1978, Ed Brooke, the first black senator since Reconstruction, the only black senator elected, the only black senator in the United States at that point who was elected without a military occupation of his state. Let's put it that way. The only black senator at that time in history to ever have been elected without a military occupation of his state was defeated by a candidate named Paul Tsongas with the help of a Middlesex County DA who opened a criminal investigation into a civil divorce case in order to help Paul Tsongas' Senate campaign. Now, guess the name of the Middlesex County DA who opened this criminal case into a black Republican's civil divorce.
Did you say DA?
DA. Massachusetts is the state.
Which asshole came from Massachusetts?
Middlesex County.
Why is this familiar? And I can't grasp the name. Who was it?
John Kerry.
Oh, right.
And remember that John Kerry was elected Middlesex County DA because he was a big war protester. But when push comes to shove, party loyalty, let's open a criminal investigation into the black guy's divorce to help the white conservative guy whose grandparents were Greek immigrants win, because this will help us with the white working class who we think are pissed at us because of integration.
Gotcha.
So you have all these people who are who are either members of or working for the ruling class. Remember, while we talk a lot about working class Joe, Biden's father was a used car dealer who was doing really, really well despite not going to college, and who gave Joe Biden a Corvette for his 18th birthday.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
working class Joe is actually the son of a used car dealer who was the first person in his family to go to college because his family had just joined the nouveau rich. And is there anybody less generous than the nouveau rich? I mean, let's remember, despite the name, it was the Tories, Benjamin Disraeli's Conservative Party, and not the liberals who tried to make the welfare system more humane after the liberals basically required people. I can't say this enough. The liberals, in order to collect social welfare, required poor people to walk on a treadmill to mill grain when they had a country full of rivers that didn't need any manual labor to mill grain because of all the water-powered mills. It was just because they believed that the poorhouse had to suck, because if the poorhouse didn't suck, everyone would want to live there.
And that is what guides our policies today.
Yes.
Make sure that people are just surviving.
Yeah.
And this is a thing, and this is where I just don't, even though I was born in Canada, I don't relate in a lot of ways, because I don't know, I tell my parents I think they brought in the ancestral culture. They like pounded it into me too much or something.
Well, so I will say that the first English-speaking neighborhoods in Montreal were a combination of Black loyalists who fought for the UK to be freed from slavery, and Maroons who were deported from Jamaica because they had been fighting against slavery.
But I understand the Maroons mostly settled on the coast.
The Maroons mostly settled on the coast, and they didn't. And the ones who settled in Montreal didn't stay very long. They got sent ultimately to Sierra Leone because they didn't like the weather in Canada, and that created a whole different colonial problem.
Freetown.
Yeah, Sierra Leone and Liberia created a whole new and complex colonial problem that had never existed before. The idea of the Western educated descendant of Africans coming and taking over.
It's diasporic politics, man. I'm finding that people are now waking up to diasporic politics, and if they know they are, in other words, the people who left the country and settled elsewhere are not the same and are not spokespeople for the people in the country who stayed behind.
Yeah,
they're not. We're completely different. I'm part of a diaspora. Like, I'm fully aware that I am not quite, like, I didn't grow up there.
Yeah.
Right? So my parents are from Guyana, which is actually next to Venezuela. So I've had a hell of a time, like, fighting with white Venezuelans. Anyway,
another friend of mine has some Dr. Tamanisha John. You should follow her if you're not, though. I think she's still on Twitter. She's interesting. She's had a beautiful experience because she's from Georgia, and she taught it. Her family's from Guyana. She taught at Emory in Atlanta, and now she teaches at York. Dr. Tamanisha John. Now she teaches at York University in Toronto.
Oh.
So she's seen both sides of academia in Georgia and Toronto, and she can tell you how similar they are.
Faculty of Liberal Arts. Oh, Clark. Okay. thank you
What?
for this.
It was my pleasure.
Sorry, that was just me. I
Yeah.
put like that were the synapses synapsing.
Yeah.
That's what you just
No,
saw there,
that's
okay?
what this used to be my favorite thing back in the day when I still had a Twitter presence is does so and so know about so and so? If not, I should tell them about them.
Dr. John studies Caribbean development, sovereignty, and politics, as well as Canadian foreign policy, economic imperialism, financial exclusion, and corporate power.
She wrote some really good stuff
Class,
analyzing the
Race, and Corporate Power is one of her books.
yes.
And the Review of Radical Political Economy and Social Economic Studies. I'm assuming there's a paper in there that she has.
She has a
Yeah.
PhD, so she had to write a whole bunch of papers to get
Yeah.
that far.
Oh, sorry, you just saw my synapses synapsing.
That's fine.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, I could interview her. This is great. I have so many questions. Oh my gosh. This is fantastic. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much. I am a big see, people know me as being like feisty on Twitter
Yes.
and whatever, but I'm really I love I love this shit. Like I
Yeah.
love not from the politicking. I'm not so much the politicking. I'm more like policy, history, how do these structures weave it? How do they affect us? How do they affect different groups of people? And that's really my bag. It's like
Yeah. I'm a
policy and
geek too.
politics from a marginalized perspective or perspective of people who are typically the underclass. Because
Yes.
to me, that's where all the interesting shit is. Who gives a shit about the wealthy? I mean, this idea that I was listening to something the other day, and um, one one of Canada's columnists, a Canadian columnist, was talking about the Laurentian elite, and do a question was posed to him: do you think they did a good job? And he said, "Well, given what Canada is, I mean, we're this, we're that, we're the other. I think they did a good job. How could they not do a good job? Like, how could you fuck up being born on third base? Like, honestly, you have resources. You murdered a whole bunch of indigenous people to clear your way, and the ones you didn't murder, you put in
And
basically
just to
concentration camps.
just to, just to
Okay?
stir up just to stir up the English against the French again, not just indigenous people, but a bunch of French speakers too, as recently as Louis Riel.
Yes. Well, yeah, and that's also why I'm like with Carney, because his idea of Canada is very upper Canada and lower Canada. For those who don't know, lower Canada is Montreal, which is actually
Yep.
northeast of Toronto, but that's a whole never mind. It has to
Yep.
do with the way the St.
It's
Lawrence
about
flows.
it's about the family compact versus the old line descendants
There you
of
go.
the
And
original French settlers.
there you go. Um and so this, I guess, what the hell was I saying? I just lost my train of thought.
You're talking about Mark Carney being so very elite and so very upper Canada Anglophone, Wall Street for an American
All
reference.
the things, the fact that you're right, he's Laurentian elite and Wall Street and Bank of England, the city. Like, those are the worst places ever for obscene capitalism. If you think of where he spent his life,
Yeah.
I just, the more, you know what?
Now,
Thank you for helping me put that
now,
together.
now, I am
Because I realized, oh, it's worse than I thought.
I am speculating and not reporting. But Mark Carney is the sort of
Well,
person I would expect to see in an email to Epstein. And I mean that
I thought
simply
they were
because
just
of the
talking
social
about
and
him.
financial circles. Because the question that comes to me all the time lately is, what if Jeffrey Epstein, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump are just perfectly representative wealthy people and not aberrations at all?
They're looking like they're not aberrations, to be honest.
Exactly.
Look how big and tight their web was.
Mm-hmm.
You
It
know,
brings to
I
mind a word that frequently gets used about the ruling class of Rome: decadence.
we are in an era of decadence, yeah. Yeah.
And it seems like these wealthy people and these powerful people are all, again, hyperbole, folks, creeps or perverts or landlords or criminals. And it looks like the creeps and the perverts who were all hanging out together were all hanging out together because they were also criminal landlords. And there's this political side to it too, where you see the members, Epstein's associates, not just emailing each other about creepy sex stuff, but also about creepy political stuff.
Absolutely.
And more importantly, as Americans on one political side of the aisle or the other like to forget, this is a bipartisan scandal that includes both our current president and former Democratic donor, Donald Trump, and our former president and former recipient of Donald Trump's donor cash, Bill Clinton. The thing that
I can't
everybody...
tell you how much I despise the Clintons. And
Uh,
I cannot tell you how much I hate when people sit up there and praise Hillary
who
Clinton.
was
The woman is evil. Okay.
Chelsea's...
At the end of the day, ask the Clintons what they did in Haiti, and
Yes.
then we could talk.
Ask them what they did in Africa when
Oh
Bill
my
Clinton was
gosh.
president.
Right?
Ask Bill
So
Clinton if
this
he's
idea that
really...
Hillary is some Hillary
Ask Bill Clinton if he's really happy with everything Paul... why am I... Paul Kagame. I blanked for a moment. Is he really happy with everything Paul Kagame has done in Rwanda to end the genocide? Well, he seems to have exported it to Congo for the benefit of Bill Gates.
who isn't he the largest landowner in Africa right now?
I believe he is. I don't know for sure. I know he's one of the 2 or 3 largest landowners in the U.S.
Yeah. So the fact that he was all up at Epstein,
But more importantly, everything that comes from Congo, every element that the West steals from Congo goes directly into systems that work for Bill Gates's empire and make him richer. So it really matters that he's best friends with Paul Kagame, and that Kagame is so close with Museveni in Uganda, and that the two of them seem to have the final say on what actually happens in Congolese politics.
I'm going to switch a little bit, and I have a question for you.
Sure.
What do you think? So I'm going to switch to the Middle East and ask you about the UAE, and then I'm going to ask about the UAE in relation to Sudan, and whether or not you think this is something that I'm thinking about. I haven't started like looking at it because I've just done other things. But what is floating around in my head is, how is this Iran war and Iran attacks on the UAE affecting their support of the civil war, and I use that term loosely, in Sudan?
That's a very good question. Now, I will note that Yemen has entered
They've entered the chat,
declared their
have they?
support for Iran, and that we're helping block off the Straits of Hormuz, and we're going to help Iran attack whoever they need to attack. I got to say, the Arab Spring, for all the stories that people tell about how disappointing it was, it can't be all that bad if it gave us the Houthi.
Listen, I am just
But as far as the Middle East goes, so what does UAE stand for? Let's start there.
the United Arab Emirates. What
What
do
is
they
an
stand?
emirate?
I listen. I What is an emirate?
In basic linguistics, just basic
I
linguistics
know
is
this is where
barony.
you're going, and this is why I'm waiting for you because I
Barony,
know you're gonna break it down
a
to like the
county,
root, and I'm like, what's he getting at?
for a word that everybody understands, a county used to be the territory ruled by a count.
Right,
The count was the guy in charge of his county, and he only answered to the king.
right.
An emir was an officer of the Ottoman Empire who was appointed by the empire to manage some territory reasonably autonomously, but
So they were like
still for
governors.
the empire.
So they were like colonial governors.
They were the original origin of emir is that they were colonial governors for the occupying Ottoman Empire.
For the Ottoman Empire. Okay, got it.
So the United Arab Emirates are not democratic. They're absolute monarchies ruled by two emirs, one in Abu Dhabi and one in Dubai. That's why they're united, because there are two of them.
I see. I see.
So these two guys run this whole country with the help of a bureaucracy, and that's it. That's the government. It's like Saudi Arabia, which is a kingdom ruled by a royal family. The only real difference is there were two royal families in the UAE.
Mm-hmm.
Also, let's keep in mind that the fact that they haven't changed from emir to something else sort of
Yeah.
suggests they still owe loyalty to somebody like the king of Saudi Arabia or even maybe the president of the United States. Who knows? But they've kept that Ottoman title emir. We're in charge because we have the power. We were born to the purple, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So they're exactly the kind of rich people that American rich people want to be, or that Canadian
Yes.
rich people want to be.
Yes. Okay, got you. Okay. Yes. Okay, I understand.
And the
Because
reason that we like these royal families and emirates are these are all the people who manage things for the Ottomans, for the British, for the French. These are middlemen. They were colonial middlemen from the very origin of their title when they became emirs. And that's been their career for their entire
that
lives.
makes sense as to their yeah. Yeah. And how do the people feel?
Well, I mean, the Arab Spring was started in Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Yemen, and the U.S. helped quash it
Yeah.
in Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Bahrain, and tried to quash it in Tunisia and failed.
Mm-hmm.
And now call the guy in Tunisia, who the Tunisians haven't wanted to take out of power since not too long after the Arab Spring, because he keeps standing up for the principles of the Arab Spring. We keep calling him a dictator and saying that we need regime change in Tunisia. And as far as the whole Sudan thing, I think it does make a difference. I think both that UAE and Israel, because let's remember, Israel is one of the groups that is helping the UAE back the RSF. I think that the interference in what the UAE and Israel are doing in Sudan definitely connects back and forth. I don't want to accept the organized axis of resistance against capitalism language I hear from some people who are more team players in what they see as a sort of a game than in real critics of power. But I do definitely think that what Iran is doing certainly helps people in Sudan indirectly in the long run. You can't deny that.
That's my assumption that I'm going in with, although I do realize it's an assumption.
It is an assumption.
So I won't. Yeah, I will realize that is my assumption that I'm going in with, but that I haven't proved it yet. I haven't supported it yet. But that would be where I would land.
My assumption, and this starts to get into my geopolitics, which don't matter because I'm one dude with the show.
Wasn't the UAE also selling them weapons and stuff?
The UAE was
the RSF.
The UAE and Israel are the primary backers of the RSF.
RSF. Okay, yeah.
It is. There is a perfectly legitimate argument to make that they are acting as surrogates for the U.S.
Well, yeah.
If not directly, then indirectly, because the U.S. believes what benefits the UAE and Israel and Sudan will benefit them too. I know that the U.S. was only ever really seemed to care about what was going on in Sudan for a brief moment in time where George W. Bush loved to pose with the president with the cowboy hat.
Yeah, and George Clooney had his couple of thing in.
And
the Democrats hate George Clooney now. I forgot.
Well, his wife is Palestinian, so that makes a difference.
Oh, she's not Lebanese?
Oh, no, she is Lebanese. You're right. I take it back. She's well, but here's where.
No, but she not have.
She's Lebanese. She's got Palestinian relatives, but I believe she's mostly Lebanese. But this is where it gets complicated because
it's the Levant. What could I say?
The Israelis like to say there aren't any Palestinians. They're Jordanians and Syrians and Lebanese, when the actual fact is, no, there aren't any Syrians or Jordanians or Lebanese. They're all Palestinian.
I don't doubt it.
Arab nationalism
is very much
starts
integrated
in Jerusalem in the 1880s. The founder of the original Arab nationalist movement, co-founder, was the leading, I don't like to use the word aristocrat, but was the leading civil leader of the Jewish community in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. He was one of the co-founders of the original Arab nationalist movement because he was an Arab Jew.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Like the amount of integration and intermixing and intermarrying and all of that it's really tough to be like, you're a natural Jew and you're not. Like, how do they distinguish then?
I can give you the Orthodox definition. The Orthodox definition is really easy, and it's really easy for the worst of patriarchal reasons. Orthodox Jews say that you're a Jew if your mother was Jewish, because we can't ever know who someone's father is, but we know who someone's mother is.
Okay, but
then there's also conversion. If you're
when we say Jewish, do we mean the religion or do we mean the tribes?
So now that's the best question ever, because the Zionist movement was founded by atheists and then co-opted by Reform Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
The originally Orthodox Judaism was institutionally opposed to Zionism on a massive scale, and that only changed after Reform Judaism sort of took over Zionism, and a bunch of Reform Jews started going what I would call undercover in Orthodox Judaism. It's so difficult and complicated. Mm-hmm. And you have to be careful to avoid what sounds like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories just because it's so weird. But The original founder of Zionism, even before Theodore Herzl, was a man named Nathan Birnbaum.
Mm.
Nathan Birnbaum became Orthodox. And when he became Orthodox, he became in favor of what we would call kibbutz living in Poland, as opposed to going to Israel to build kibbutzes like Theodore Herzl wanted to do, and he had originally wanted to do. He thought that this sort of Jewish state socialism project had to happen in Europe because Orthodox Judaism's roots were in Europe and not the Middle East. That Judaism, as he saw it, was a diaspora religion rather than something deeply connected to Palestine, and that the diaspora was where Judaism belonged, and that it was the Polish and Russian Jews who were looking for a better place, who had the responsibility to build a better place in Poland and Russia, or as it was at that time, the Pale of Settlement, make the Pale of Settlement everything that it could be, as opposed to trying to go someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
And so he became totally opposed to his own movement, which is why you hear about Herzl all the time and not the other guy.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to have to go.
Of course. I appreciate the time. 90 minutes is
Good.
about perfect. Longer than this, we start to lose people.
Yeah, this was good.
I love it. You expect email from me again. I'm trying to rebuild my Rolodex. My Rolodex used to be my big Twitter account with 20-some thousand followers, and I don't have access to that anymore.
Yeah, it's that's the thing about when you build on those
social media platforms. It's connected to the platform and not to you.
Exactly.
To the account and not to you.
Exactly. So they retain full control.
It's depressing.
Well, I'm sure we could talk about that another time.
That would be great for its own show too, and because it ties into what you said about Taylor Lorenz understanding the internet, which I wish I did better, because then I would be more successful at what I'm doing.
It's so much work.
It is.
And
I'm working harder.
Building an audience is that this is what I've realized about building an audience, and I'm like expanding on platforms. Mm-hmm. So when you have to build an audience on a new platform, I think once you get into the metrics and stuff, it starts to become a drag, be a job, and if you have any sort of anxiety whatsoever, it's not good. So all I'm saying is the people who really build an audience just show up. Mm-hmm. That's it. You'll see them. Here, no matter where you go, you'll see them.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah,
it's hard.
And once you do that, you'll gain
one thing.
Here's the other thing. I'm gonna leave you with this on my the Canadian Media Observatory, I believe, they did a report on politics in the media landscape, and it just keeps talking about how it is Canadian mainstream media no longer sets the agenda in terms of what is going to be talked about, and that political influencers have become so important here, everywhere, yes, but definitely in Canada, where the scope for discussion is so narrow. Right? You can't talk about X this way, and you can't talk about Y that way. Mm-hmm. And because of that, a lot of people are frustrated because they don't see themselves or their concerns being spoken about.
Yep.
And so, of course, you get to somebody who has a persona you like, has the kind of outlook you have, and bang, bing, bang, boom. It's really on It's just online. Politics is online. It's more online than it's offline these
and
days.
and I get when people tell me that you know, when people, I always used to see people talk about real life versus social media, and it's like, don't you understand? This is the 21st century. Social media is part of real life now. This isn't like the 90s where the internet was something you did. This is something everybody is plugged into all the time, not because they're addicted in the way you want to say, but because they need to be to know what's going on to operate in the world you built.
Very well put. And on that note, I will end on that high.
And that's a great place for us to go ahead and cut this short. Thank you, Erica, for joining us. Thank you, everyone else, for watching.
Hi, everybody.
As always, if you want to support the show, Patreon is the best place to pay me.
Go support independent. Oh, and you can catch me on badandbitchy.com.
Yes.
Or you could Google me, or I'm all over. I'm like on everything.
I admit that I follow Erica on Blue Sky after being separated a few times on Twitter. I'm enjoying the way Blue Sky is built around interaction, and frustrated at the way that it doesn't get my stuff out there.
I'm just, there are too many centrists on Blue Sky. Too many of these liberals. Like, they came in and they think that they could set the rules of
they don't even understand that Jack isn't on their side. He's just a watered down version of Elon.
Hello. I don't even want to get into that big scam.
That's a whole nother show again.
Jack and Jay-Z did, okay? Because they scammed the hell out of some.
So what I will say is this. If you're willing to do a little research for any gaps you don't know, the next time I email you, it'll be so we can do a deep dive into the personal history of Elon Musk.
Oh, God.
And his Canadian grandfather. Because his Canadian grandfather is such an interesting character.
Oh, my gosh. I feel like I need drugs for that.
That's perfectly fair. Elon needs drugs to be Elon, so it only makes sense that we need drugs to put up with him.
Listen, you can't tell kids don't do drugs. You can't. No.
Not anymore.
No. It's like,
plus I grew up at the time when everybody was saying just say no to drugs. And so, it's like, no. I'm not going to narc on my friends for you. I'm not going to become your cop. On that note, you have a great week. Everybody,
you too. Bye.
Everybody else have a great week. I don't have anything. I do have a show with Connor Exum next week. We're going to be talking about fringe conservative candidates during election years, especially midterms. And on that note, until then, I'll tweet at you.